So here we have a bunch of willow stakes, and by planting the willow stakes, we're helping enhance the vegetation, so getting those roots in the ground so that they can start to filter again and start to store water again.
Willows bind the soil. They are incredibly good at it. And they are also very easy to propagate. So you can take a cutting and cut it into 3-4 pieces. And then you put it into a hole, close the hole neatly around it. And if you did it right, then it will grow.
So here we have a bunch of willow stakes, and by planting the willow stakes, we're helping enhance the vegetation, so getting those roots in the ground so that they can start to filter again and start to store water again.
Willows bind the soil. They are incredibly good at it. And they are also very easy to propagate. So you can take a cutting and cut it into 3-4 pieces. And then you put it into a hole, close the hole neatly around it. And if you did it right, then it will grow.
Good evening. Let's do a little tech check here. Flora, can you let me know if you can see my slides?
I can see the sustainable workshop image.
Awesome, thank you. So welcome to the Sustainable Trails Workshop. My name is Amy McLeod. I am the Provincial Riparian Specialist and Eastern Slopes Program Coordinator for the Alberta Riparian Habitat Management Society, also known as Cows and Fish. And I will be your host for this evening. I want to first off start by saying thank you to our generous supporters. With the support of DFO, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Alberta government, we are able to put on this workshop. And tonight I am joining you from Mohkinstsis, Calgary, Alberta, and I honor and acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, shared with the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda and the Métis Nation of Alberta. There are probably many others joining from across Alberta, so I'd also like to acknowledge Treaty 4, 6, 8, and 10, and of the many First Nations whose Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. The long relationship between Indigenous people and this land includes a deep knowledge and respect for the living and non-living entities that create this amazing place that we all call home. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I am with an organization called Cows and Fish. Cows and Fish is a not-for-profit that empowers people who live, work, and play in Alberta to take action to care for riparian areas, those areas that connect land and water. And I do often get asked about what cows have to do with fish and what sort of relationship they have. And for me, the answer is an understanding how the land interacts with the water and understanding how what we do on the land will impact the water. And so it isn't just about the relationship between cows and fish. There are many different human activities that are occurring on the landscape. And as a result, those activities will impact our water. And so if we take a step back, we say that fish aren't just a product of the water, they are a product of the entire landscape. And it doesn't matter where you are on a watershed, you are part of that drainage. So any activity you do, whether it's right beside the waterway or farther away, will impact the health of our watersheds and in the end of ourselves. So Cows and Fish moves beyond the polarization and recognizes that because all things are connected by water, we need to work together to find solutions that will benefit us all. And so it isn't just about livestock management. With appropriate management and care, we can have productive and profitable landscapes that don't cause our watersheds to unravel and negatively impact our finned kin. So again, riparian areas are those areas that connect our land and water, and they provide clean water, flood and drought resiliency, habitat, and recreational opportunities. And the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity ended in 2020. And with that, we know that there is a biodiversity crisis. And so we are now in the UN Decade of Restoration, preventing, halting, and reversing the degradation of ecosystems worldwide. I hope through this workshop today, we are empowered to take action to support ecosystems that support our fish and wildlife and support ourselves, because healthy ecosystems are necessary for healthy communities. And so before we move on with the schedule today, a few technical notes. We will have 4 presentations, and then we will open up the session to all the presenters for a question and answer period. So please use the Q&A box throughout the session to ask any of your questions. There is also a chat box where you can tell us where you're from, you can leave comments, but please be respectful. And so on with the program. First up, we have the lovely Marina Craner, and I've been honored to work with Marina quite a bit these last few years. Marina was born in Austria and spent as much time as she could outdoors from an early age, observing and learning about plants, animals, weather, and geography. She moved to Alberta in 2002, and with her passion for the natural environment, she soon became involved with the Ghost Watershed Alliance Society, joining the board of directors as a volunteer. In the spring of 2009, she was hired by GWAS as the executive director and has helped the organization grow significantly since then. Marina is an active volunteer in her community. She enjoys spending her leisure time outdoors hiking, horseback riding, as well as observing the local flora and fauna. While she has a keen interest in natural science and continuously improves her knowledge through training and research, Marina believes that feeling connected to nature is crucial in order to preserve our environment. Through her work with GWAS, she has led many walks and hikes in the Ghost Watershed and is engaging people in restoration projects. And Marina, I invite you to take over sharing the screen so that we can see your presentation. Excellent, that looks great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you. Also, thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate your interest in our Sustainable Trails workshop. So tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about using bioengineering for erosion control. I'm Marina Craner with the Ghost Watershed Alliance, as Amy has already introduced me. So the Ghost Watershed Alliance is a watershed stewardship group, and we were established in 2002. So we celebrated 20 years in business last year, and we are still largely volunteer driven. What do? We gather and share knowledge, we raise awareness, and we work collaboratively to improve watershed health. And here on the photo on the bottom, you can see some of our collaborative work. It was a bioengineering field day that we did in collaboration with Trout Unlimited Canada and the Calgary ATV riders. The Ghost Watershed is about 1,000 square kilometers in size, and as you can see here, the top end of the watershed is mostly protected areas. So we do have Don Getty Wildland Park, the Ghost Wilderness, but the largest portion of the watershed is actually multiple use and within the Rocky Mountains Forest Reserve, and only a small portion is settled and has some private land, some First Nations reserves, and some grazing leases. Common issues that we observe in the Ghost Watershed are erosion, loss of riparian vegetation, soil compaction, and sedimentation of streams. Native trout call the Ghost Watershed home. Bull trout and Westlobe cutthroat trout are both existent in the Ghost Watershed. They are considered a species at risk with a threatened status at this time. Cumulative effects of all kinds of land uses affect native trout. Those include habitat degradation, hybridization with non-native species such as rainbow trout, overharvesting, and barriers to fish movement, as the one that you see here on the bottom, those hanging culverts that have in the meantime fortunately been replaced with an open bottom culvert by Trout Unlimited Canada. So why are we talking about fish so much? Really, they are a really good indicator for watershed health and good water quality. They require cold, clean, clear, and connected water to survive, and that is in our own best interest. The Ghost Watershed is part of Calgary's source water area, so water that comes from this watershed ends up to be the drinking water supply of many people downstream in Cochrane and Calgary and further downstream. So why do we undertake bioengineering? We want to prevent excessive amounts of sediment from ending up in streams, re-establish riparian vegetation, and control erosion, prevent channeling of runoff. And you can see here on the picture on the left, channeling of runoff. This is an old trail. It's a rut. This trail didn't lead anywhere, so we decommissioned that trail in cooperation with Alberta Environment and Parks. And with the help of volunteers, we did rough and loose, mostly with pickaxes, and a little bit uphill from this location that you see on the photo, we did some work with machinery as well. And you can see that just this work with making it look a little bit messy helped to stop that direct channeling of the water into the stream, which is down here. And this is 4 Mile Creek, and it is also critical habitat for Westlobe cutthroat trout. Bioengineering employs low-cost restoration techniques using locally harvested native plants. And you can see our volunteers harvesting willow stakes here. And we have our bioengineering specialist with us explaining how to do it, how to collect those stems that will later in the day be planted. Here you can see an example of bioengineering next to a new OAG bridge that solved stream sedimentation. So you can see the bridge was installed, but it didn't really do the trick in terms of preventing sediment from entering the stream. So bioengineering was applied to these barren areas next to the bridge, and they completely stopped the sediment from entering the creek. So a technique that we oftentimes use is called rough and loose. It is a bioengineering technique that was developed by Dave Polster to treat disturbed sites. So you use excavators. They don't always have to be that big. This is a 20-ton. But basically what you do is you loosen up the soil, you put the bucket in, you put half of it back into the hole, and then you place half of it next to the hole. At the end of the day, the idea is that all of the soil in this particular area is decompacted. Rough and loose, the biggest benefit of it is that it captures runoff. And you can see in this aerial photo of the 4 Mile Creek site, you can see those holes here at the beginning, and they have quite a bit of sediment and water in them. And the further down you go and look at those holes, the more clear the water becomes. And it is encouraged to rather infiltrate rather than enter the stream. So rough and loose may look quite shocking at first glance. This is a site in 2020, but only a year later, you already can see that it decompacts the soils and gives pioneering plants a chance to grow. And here you can see some of these pioneering native plants. So we mostly use balsam poplar in this area as well as native willows. And what you see on the photo here is just 1 year of growth. So the benefits of rough and loose are that it prevents overland flow, it promotes infiltration of water into the ground rather than running off on the surface, it prevents erosion and provides diverse habitat for different plant species as well as wildlife. At the same time, it improves fish habitat, it reestablishes the riparian vegetation and thus creates cover and shade, and it also helps to improve water quality by reducing the sedimentation. So how can you help? You can keep wheels out of water. You can raise awareness with your family and friends. Volunteering for a bioengineering field day, cleanup events that we undertake, or trail improvement with some of the other groups here on the workshop as well would be a really, really big benefit. Alerting us and or our partner organization to some of the problem areas that you see on the landscape is a very important part as well. So we want to thank our funders, without whom this would not be possible, doing bioengineering workshops that we provide free of charge to participants. And we want to highlight that working together is really the key to success. And with that, I'd like to introduce our video. We put together a little almost 9-minute video showing the highlights of a bioengineering workshop we undertook a couple of years ago. So Amy, with that, if you could share the video, please.
Everybody tends to think of streams and rivers as that little blue line that runs through the valley, but really the water is coming from the entire landscape. Water originates on these hillsides, in these valleys, percolates down into the groundwater, and then feeds back into our streams and rivers.
Water is really critical. All of the species, like we all need water, right? Fish, animals, plants, birds, humans. Like we're in the Wiperous and the Ghost Watershed here today, doing some habitat restoration to some nearby stream that's been damaged by human development and use. So we're trying to restore these areas for the future
This is a two-day bioengineering workshop that consists of a classroom session for a full day as well as a field restoration day out in the Ghost Watershed. And the nice thing is that it has really helped us bring together a very diverse group of people. We've had First Nations people here, we've had a lot of environmental consultants, we've had professionals here, as well as recreational users, both motorized and non-motorized recreational users join us for these workshops because they want to learn how they can do their part to keep the source watershed intact.
Looking at the future that climate change has to bring and recognizing how valuable an area like the Ghost Watershed is, we need to start thinking about water management from the whole landscape perspective.
There's all sorts of activities happening on this landscape. So there's cattle grazing out here, there's forestry happening, there's lots of recreational activities happening on the landscape as well. Those activities result in trails and roads, and whenever they cross a stream, that is one more point source for sediment and other contaminants to enter the water. The West Slope cutthroat trout and bull trout numbers have declined significantly over the last 100 to 150 years, and their distribution has also contracted. So they're not found in a lot of the streams and rivers where they used to be found. Watersheds that are most intact are going to be the areas where those native trout species have the best chance of persisting. And watersheds that are most intact are also best capable of providing that clean water, which is the source of drinking water for Calgary and all the way across the prairies. So the native trout are an indicator of watershed integrity.
So this is a small tributary to Vipers Creek. It's critical habitat for West Slope cutthroat trout. It's also a designated trail. There was a bridge on the site here before, but it was too narrow for some of the ATVs that are being used nowadays. And so people found a ford upstream of the bridge. And of course, we want to try to keep motorized vehicles out of the creek so that we don't have too much sediment coming down from the sides into the creek and impacting fish habitat by closing up those clean spaces between rocks to spawn, as well as for the invertebrates, their food, to thrive. A couple of years ago, we worked with Trout Unlimited Canada and Alberta Environmental Parks, and they put this new bridge in place that is now wide enough for the side-by-sides and rerouted the trail a little bit away from the creek. So how we use bioengineering in such a site is that where we have eroded stream banks, we stabilize those stream banks by planting willows again. So that way we still have the recreational opportunity and at the same time have improved fish habitat. These are really nice willows, so we should definitely...
Bioengineering is the use of living plant materials to perform some engineering function. Very inexpensive. We didn't need to import any material. The materials were collected right on the site. Willows that we're using, and they're pioneering species, we use those species to start the process of recovery. Pioneering species have evolved over millions of years to start the process of ecosystem recovery. What you see in the rough and loose is that it's pioneering species that come in.
Here you can see the rough and loose technique developed by Dave Polster. It decompacts the soil, so that way you can have plants reestablish itself. Quite a bit of this rough and loose technique has been used in the eastern slopes over the past few years, and we've heard from a lot of people that it looks very destructive. It looks almost like a moonscape, and they figured that this is doing much more damage than recreational use can do. And really what we have seen today, and in examples that Dave has given over the past 20-25 years, is that rough and loose actually enhances the ecosystem. It gives plants a chance to get a foothold. And it just takes a few years until you really see the big difference. When we did the rough and loose technique a couple of years ago, it immediately stopped the sediment coming from the road from ending up in the creek. It stopped it right there. It was like little pools that collected the water. And if you look at it now, 2 years later, you can see that there is an abundance of plants growing there already. So all of that erosion is essentially stopped within a couple of years.
The rough and loose does two things. One is it prevents the access. The other thing that happens is that it creates habitat for a whole diversity of species to come in. The holes will fill up with water. The mounds will soak up moisture, and the whole thing will be revegetated. You're basically creating conditions that foster the establishment of the pioneering species.
So I've confirmed these are willows by the leaf structure and kind of the form of the plant. I'm also looking to make sure that I can get at least 1.20 meters to 1.5 meters thumb thick, Dave Polster's rule of thumb. So now I'm just pruning off any of the stuff that's smaller than my pinky or my thumb. Once this is planted in the ground, so let's say we plant it that deep, all this kind of live tissue will be in contact with soil and moisture, and it'll, instead of sending up shoots, it'll send out roots. And so the deeper it is, the more chance the pole, the live stake, will have to access water and soil.
There's been lots of examples of major cities, whether it's New York or others, that are looking into putting a lot more investment of their upfront water treatment costs into watershed stewardship. Certainly this is one of the major source watersheds for the city of Calgary. You know, trying to reduce erosion on the landscapes, trying to mitigate compaction, trying to look at how we build trails on these landscapes and which trails are sustainable and which ones aren't, and restoring those ones that aren't, ultimately is going to have benefits to the city of Calgary and the water supply and the water treatment costs, because you're trying to stop that erosion at the source.
I love being in nature. It brings a peace of mind. It's just a happy place, so to speak, for me. It always has been. Me as a 4x4, I stick to the trails. I go where I'm allowed. That's when I see the damage being done. It's so nice to be able to bring it back. And I just love looking at a pristine nature. And so that's our goal, just to bring it back so she can help herself, so to speak. We just kick-started.
We are hoping to do at least one restoration site every year with volunteers. We are sharing knowledge and sharing experiences and perspectives as well. Empowering people to do their part in the watershed would not be possible without all these organizations working together.
Thank you, Marina. Up next tonight, we have Maggie Scallion. Maggie is an experienced outdoor recreation professional with more than 20 years experience in trail planning, design, and recreation management. Her expertise ranges from, her chosen sports of cross-country skiing, trail running, to mountain biking, ski touring, and nearly a decade of experience working with motorized sport groups in BC. Take it away, Maggie.
Okay, just one moment. I just press go on my PowerPoint here. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I'm Maggie Scallion. I work with McElhaney as an outdoor recreation professional, and I was asked to speak tonight about sustainable trail development, which is something I'm very passionate about and have worked in the area for quite a while. Yeah, so looking forward to sharing some thoughts with you this evening. The first big question that's worth discussing is, what is a sustainable trail? And one of the kind of hot topics or definitions that has been flying around the business world anyway for a long time is that whole concept of triple bottom line. So sustainable trails are not only environmentally sustainable, but also socially sustainable and economically sustainable as well. And that's kind of one of the first things I want to dive into this evening. What does that mean from a trail perspective? So socially sustainable trails are trails that meet user desires. And the list of words that are on the screen right now that you see are from the US Bureau of Land Management, and they did a whole engagement process a number of years ago to identify why people search out trails and what types of experiences they would like to have on trails. So it could be nature, challenge, social, fun and playfulness. So there's a whole variety of reasons why people use trails or use different trails at different times. And I think that the takeaway from what is a socially sustainable trail is that one trail can't be everything to everybody. It's kind of like designing a camel. It's like not a very attractive looking animal, but has a lot of function. So maybe two animals would have done a better job in that sense. But yeah, so with trails, you really want to, when you're designing or planning or evaluating how a trail is looking, you want to be thinking about who are the users using this trail and why are they out there and how can you deliver that experience to them. And the other things that we like to consider more often these days are concepts around universal design and accessibility. So my mom, for example, she's had both of her hips replaced and she just can't step over large obstacles anymore. So understanding that she might want like a long, physically demanding hike, but she can't have a technically challenging hike, and finding ways to communicate and create experiences that are accessible to different types of users. This trail I would describe, trails maybe, I don't know. It's an image of a, I guess, linear corridor that has been used as a trail, and there's ponding and poor ground quality kind of right on the trail tread, and it's resulted in extreme trail braiding and people avoiding the trail. And why would they do that? It's probably not people that want technical challenge or adventure or environmental degradation. They're probably out there looking for a nice nature cruise and they don't want to get their machine too dirty, and therefore they're avoiding or going around these ponding and puddle areas. This is one example. You often see this type of social unsustainability on commuter trails that have an excessive number of switchbacks, where you'll see people cutting switchbacks and kind of creating their own lines and increasing that trail density and damaging the environment around the trail. I would say in my experience, and I've worked for a number of years now with motorized groups, is that most motorized trails, snowmobile, ATV, and dirt bike to some extent, are not purpose-built trails. They're not built with the user objectives in mind. Often they're using existing linear corridors to create that experience. So if there was any one takeaway to make a socially sustainable motorized use trail, would be to design a trail with that purpose in mind and create a trail experience that people are looking for. And we move on to environmental sustainability. And there's kind of two components to environmental sustainability. And one would be how the trail is constructed, and the other would be where the trail is located. So trail construction, it's no secret for many years now, kind of the number one bad guy with trail construction is erosion, and that's kind of managing water. There are tons of really great trail construction guidelines that exist across North America and around the world. And there's one in Alberta. It's the Trail Development Guidelines for Alberta's Public Land, and it was written by McElhaney in 2017, 2018. And that has a whole bunch of really great recommendations and drawings and examples of trail construction that would be considered environmentally sustainable. Yeah, this is an example of a bench cut trail, and that's kind of the gold standard of trail construction. It's really easy for mountain bike trails, hiking trails, dirt bike trails, because it's a narrow conveyance. It's a little bit harder to do with ATV, side-by-side Jeep trails, because then you're creating something that's a little bit more like a road. But the really great thing about these bench cut trails is that the water can sheet down the slope, across the trail, and off, and it doesn't run up and down the trail tread. And if constructed properly, you don't even need upslope ditching. Yeah, and the second thing about environmental sustainability is where you're going to place this trail. And so this is just a sketch that was done with a conceptual trail plan, and it shows other trails that are in the environment and some contours. Typically, we will also overlay ecological information with our trail planning. So what are wildlife corridors? Where are there sensitive plants, sensitive species such as like reptiles or lizards? We work down in the Cypress Hills quite a bit, and there's snails down there that you have to watch out for. Their little nesting areas. So there's tons of available online databases, and obviously you can hire environmental professionals as well. But typically when trail planning, the first thing we do is just look at constraints in the environment and no-go areas, and then simply you just don't design trails that go there. I'm working on a project right now about minimizing disturbance to wildlife through trail design, and along rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, things like that, a lot of animals like to go and drink water. So it's really good to minimize trails along these water bodies, because you're more likely to be infringing on areas where animals kind of need their peace to drink and feed. And then beyond just like the base environmental concerns, you also need to consider what else is happening in the landscape. Where are there going to be residential developments, mines, forestry? All of those things add to the environmental impact, and you kind of want to avoid overstressing the environment or the ecology of an area. And sometimes like a land development paired with trail development might be too much. But also, if there's been forestry, potentially that's a really good time to build a new trail, because it's already disturbed, and you have an opportunity to establish a new line while there's minimal disturbance to, nesting birds and things like that. And finally, economic sustainability. And this one I think is often missed when it comes to trail sustainability, because the fact is maintaining trails costs money. Building trails costs money. Running a not-for-profit club to manage trails costs money. And money doesn't grow on trees, at least not that I've seen. So there also needs to be some sort of understanding of how much is it going to cost to maintain this trail, and where are we going to get that money from? Is it membership fees? Is it day use fees? Is it taxation? Will the municipality or provincial government step up to pay for trail maintenance? And it should also factor into trail construction. Like if you've got a big capital grant to build a trail or rehabilitate a trail or reroute a trail, you want to make sure that you're building that trail to a standard that does not require annual maintenance. So do it right, do it well, and hopefully minimize your costs down the road. So this is just a quick slide on kind of what are exceptional trails. It's a definition that my team at McElhaney has worked on for a while, but it's all about balancing those kind of three factors: the economic, the environmental, and the social impacts of trails. And then just to kind of wrap up the last half of this little discussion, I wanted to talk a little bit about trail development and the trail development process. And this would apply to, you know, blank slates of land that have no trails and you want to plan a trail system for them, or areas that already have a massive proliferation of trails and you just want to organize them and find out what's there and how to improve the trail experience as a whole. And so typically the first step of trail development is planning, and that's figuring out where the trails are going to go, mostly as a desktop exercise. Design is kind of the layout and construction phase of a trail, and then operations is managing the users. So trail planning, this really heavily links back to kind of that social sustainability idea, but thinking about what the trail users want, what the landscape can sustain, and what you can do kind of to keep that trail running, and like what's enough for like today, but also for 10 years down the road. It's quite common in the trail planning world to create what we call a trail management objective. And these trail management objectives factor in all these things you see on the screen right now. And they provide an aspirational description of the trail. So what is the user experience that you would like to create when you plan out a trail? Is it going to be fun? Is it going to be challenging? Is it going to be nature and a natural experience? It's going to provide adrenaline. What are those things? Is it going to be used all year round? Or where is it set? Is it a backcountry experience or is it an urban experience? And typically we'll use these trail management objectives and we'll create one for every trail in a network, and then all that put together you have a trail master plan, and it can kind of describe how the whole network works together and give you planning opportunities, saying like, oh, we're going to start with our easy trails and keep them close to the parking lot, and then we're going to build out more intermediate and advanced trails that provide different experiences. And you can have a phased build out plan, you can have a phased decommissioning plan, all these different things. Trail plans also provide reassurance to the government that you as a trail organization are organized and you have a vision and you know where you're going. Trail design and construction. I realized Marina was going to talk quite a bit about bioengineering and trail decommissioning, so I didn't dedicate a ton of time because we're pretty aligned on these concepts. But as far as trail design and construction goes, that's when you're actually working on the ground, getting your hands dirty. And we definitely like to use as much of the natural kind of environment and features as we can when we're designing and building trails. So on the left here, you see the photo where it's a little ephemeral water course crossing here. So when it rains heavily, this will fill with water, or in the spring or in the fall. So there needs to be some sort of management device for that water, but we also wanted the trail to cross it. So in this instance, there's this little kind of jump feature that's been built. Those rocks are actually close enough that you can just roll across it on your bike. You don't have to leap across, but it creates a crossing that is more sustainable than just riding through a wet area. And on the right of the screen, this is an example actually of the rough and loose method with trail decommissioning on a smaller scale, because obviously was a single track trail, but on the kind of the middle photo is shortly after the trail was decommissioned, and then just set a little bit behind it is 1 year later. So you can see how quickly this trail decommissioning takes place. And one of the things I like to highlight about trail decommissioning is you need to think about a few things. One being loosening up the trail treads so those natural occurring plants can reroot and grow. It's amazing how hiking trails and mountain bike trails can get so compacted, even with not that much weight going across them. It's just years of consistent like pressure on the ground. So loosening up the soil is really important. And then you also want to like block access. So a lot of times you'll see people drop logs across the trail or put big rocks across the trail, and that works to some extent. But I have found that it's really important as well to block kind of that visual corridor so you don't see that cut line through the trees anymore. And so often, if it's possible, we'll replant small trees right on that old trail corridor, or fake plant a dead tree so that at least for the next 6 months, it looks like there's a mature tree growing on the trail. When it comes to watercourse crossings, generally, if you're dealing with anything that consistently has water in it, the only way to cross that watercourse is with a bridge. And bridges are expensive, unfortunately, and they typically require engineering. I've provided these slides as a handout for after, and I've included a link to the Government of Alberta Bridges Standards. And they have some standard bridges there and standard abutments, which can be used for construction. But typically, bridges are really site specific, and they require fisheries approval. And then you're just ending up hiring professionals to do the work anyway. Other things that we use when there's wet areas or ephemeral watercourses are culverts or other closed bottom structures, rock armored dips, similar to this, but sometimes it's just there's no jump feature in the middle. And yeah, that's kind of it really. Rock armored dips and culverts are the other options. Yeah, and then when it comes to trail operations, this is an example of a trail. I'm sure you've seen many of these in cities, but the biggest problem with this trail is that it's been built in a flat area, and then when people walk on it, the soil gets compacted and then the water pools on the trail surface, and nobody wants to walk on a wet trail, so they walk on the edges of the trail, and then the trail just gets wider and wider and wider. So the best way to manage people is through proper construction by raising the tread of that trail and creating a slightly elevated pathway that water will drain off. But the reason I show this photo now is because often once a trail is constructed, we take our fingers off the throttle and we relax and we go, whew, that was hard work. Now we have our trail. But really, when you build a new trail, you have numerous years of constantly monitoring that trail and looking for maintenance issues and things to deal with as they come up, because the sooner you can deal with them, the less problems they cause. So maintenance, looking for erosion and tread degradation problems, adjusting trails to meet user needs. Like if you see there's consistent shortcutting in certain areas, you probably just want to adjust that trail and make it so people don't shortcut anymore. Clearing fallen trees off the trail, and also planning for asset management. So if you put a bridge on a trail or a culvert, like knowing that in X number of years, you're going to have to assess, do maintenance, and potentially replace those assets. We often recommend things like temporal closures or education with trails. So if a trail goes through an area where there's higher wildlife sensitivity at different times of year or different times of day, you can look at having temporal closures. There's some winter trails in Golden, British Columbia, where I live, that are closed in the evening and overnight during the winter because it's important habitat for white-tailed deer. And the other, I think, thing that people tend to miss once they get into the trail operations phase is use monitoring. So understanding who's on your trail, when they're on your trail, how often, like what impact has the trail had, and using that story and that understanding to plan for maintenance or request more operational funding is something that can easily be set up, and it's often easier to do if you do it immediately after the trail is built, and then you can create a story that extends over a number of years. Yeah, and then I've just included a link to some resources for your reference, and the link to the video you just watched, because I think it's such a great story about how to decommission. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end of this session. And I just put a quick list of the different things that we do as kind of the trails and outdoor recreation infrastructure team at McElhaney. And my contact information, I love answering emails. I'm one of the few. So if you do have any questions about anything, you are more than welcome to email me.
Thank you, Maggie. I will also be sending out a follow-up email probably in the next day or two after words that will have a lot of links and resources for people to follow up. Next up tonight, we have Dan Cruz. So Dan, if you can take over the screen share for your presentation and turn your camera on. Dan is the president of Calgary ATV Riders Association. He's been a member of the club for 6 years and took over as president this past year. Dan enjoys meeting new riders and taking part in stewardship events and looks forward to continuing to meet people and doing more trail work. Take it away, Dan.
All right, thank you, Amy.
We're seeing your presentation, so that's great.
Oh, perfect. So welcome everybody to this. So as Amy obviously said, I'm the president of the Calgary ATV Riders Association here based in Calgary. So what, who really is, who really are we? We're a not-for-profit club based out of Calgary. We work very closely with like-minded not-for-profit organizations such as Alberta Off-Highway, Environment Parks, Ghost Watershed, Trout Unlimited, Spray Lakes, and many, many more not-for-profit organizations that are out there. We try to work quite hard with everybody. Our volunteers every year, I know they bust their butts to keep things going. One of the things that we do look after is in the Ghost area is a lot of fallen trees, clearing up water bars, and believe it or not, we actually do quite a bit of garbage cleanup within the Ghost area. So when we're out on our stewardships, we always look for fallen trees. We try to make everything or all these trails safe for riders when they're out, especially on curves. We try and make sure that, that there's any brush that's getting off the trail or into the trail and obscuring your view when you come around corners. Without this, you can end up with some wrecks, which obviously we don't want to see that ever happen. When we keep the trails maintained properly, from getting washouts across them as well as deadfall, it forces riders, unfortunately, to make alternate paths within the trails, which obviously we don't want to allow people to do. These trails, they get hard pack, so that way we don't end up with washouts on them. And then if people do veer off, then they end up creating more damage to the ecosystems and to the landscape, which obviously we're trying to avoid people doing that. So this is kind of a list of quite a bit of things that Kara has done over a lot on our stewardships and stuff. So we do look after clearing a lot of deadfall, cleaning out water bars across the trail. If we don't have these water bars across the trail, what ends up happening is we end up with a very large V within the trail, which makes it unsafe for riders. So we need to, so by putting these water bars across it, it allows it, it catches a lot of this sediment as well from coming down. So the water bars catch it, and then usually about once a year or so, we can go in and just hand shovel them out, make them clear again, and they're good to go for another year. We do also do quite a bit of trail rerouting to keep these trails that have been in for a while, try and reroute them so that way we don't interfere with any of the fish or any wildlife. So this is actually a couple of pictures. Actually, this first one here that I've got out, this is actually a trail that we've just finished up actually here last year. It's out on the LeSure Trail, and this was actually a fairly deep mud hole that kept getting driven out. And unfortunately, towards the left actually of all these machines, there's probably about 6 or 7 other routes that got developed because this water hole got so deep that people couldn't pass through it. So they began making other trails off to the left-hand side. So these other 2 pictures are actually what the trail now looks like. So the picture on the right, actually, if you look right where my cursor is actually that same hole that's in the middle picture. So we have actually moved the trail up, and we've actually put rig matting down, and they're all linked together so they can float and flex and not get washed out. And we've built it up so that way all water will actually shed off them now, and those mats will stay there for a very long time and shouldn't cause any issues. So actually we had the honor actually of having those mats actually helicoptered out for us due to the distance of them out for us. So it was very nice actually having Environment Parks actually line that up for us, which was phenomenal because I think we'd still be out trying to actually carry those rig mats in. A couple of other things we've done in the last couple of years too is we've actually used geotech as well. And these mats actually, they're a plastic mat and then linked together, so we can actually flex them around the trees and to keep them to keep the area from getting dug out again. And with that actually too, it's made it flexible so we can actually build it around curves, because that's always where you end up pushing everything out. So with these geomat, it'll fill up with dirt, and then by having the dirt on it, we'll end up creating a barricade. And I was out in the fall, and it's still holding strong to this day. A couple of other things, obviously, that CARA does. We do actually do some willow staking, as well as we've actually repaired some of these the bridges that are across any of these streams. Obviously, without these bridges, we're going to have wheels in water, which we're trying to avoid. So we've got to keep up with these bridges, so that way they don't end up damaged and destroyed, and then everybody will end up going through the water. The picture on the right, when we did a reroute here several years ago, this area was just destroyed. So we ended up putting a whole bunch of deadfall across the trail, and just on the left actually of this side by side, we brought the trail up on higher ground, which allowed us to get away from all this already destroyed stuff, which is already in a bit of a bowl. So we took a whole bunch of deadfall, brought it across the trail so we could actually close that area right off and divert people up onto a newer area. And this is from actually the last several years actually that we've had. We've been doing a whole bunch of willow staking and stuff too, in partnership with everybody with this. I believe actually one of these pictures actually has already come up, I believe, in one of the videos. So this is, again, CARA's reputation, or not really reputation, but can't even think of the word unfortunately at the moment, but partnership that we've got with all these other organizations to keep these wheels out of water and keep these streams clean for the fish and wildlife. And people and all that. This is actually another project we had going on. We put a culvert in a little bit of a low-lying area, and with that we even went as far as putting this black filter cloth down to keep the debris and everything from coming up to the surface, so that way we don't get any of this this culvert doesn't get dug out again. And then this was actually, the left picture was us just finishing it up. We even went as far as brought a small compactor out and packed it up, so that way it's solid and it's not just loose fill. So it's a nice, good, hard packed material, and it seems to be holding actually quite well, actually up to this day so far. So also the things too, we do drain a lot of these water bars. So these water bars these holes get deeper and deeper each year, which again, people will begin to start coming around them to avoid them when they don't know how deep they are anymore. So with that hole, we'll actually drain it and then make sure that we can hopefully catch sediment and stuff in it, so that way we don't send it down farther downstream. A lot of also too, we deal with a lot of the deadfall across the trails. That's in the right picture. We've got we had some deadfall across the trails that we had to deal with. So this is actually more of the Cara team actually out dealing with some more fallen trees that have made it unsafe within the trails. And we also don't just run in the summer too. We actually do quite a bit even in the winter time actually as well. We do also send quite a bit of teams to just clean up the edges of the brush and stuff. So again, I forgot to put a picture in actually of the first part of this, but this was actually overgrown quite a bit, and you could barely even see what was down here. And now with this trimmed back, you can actually now see down the trail. So if somebody's coming down it, you can actually acknowledge that they're there and not end up with a bit of a collision. So this right one obviously was in the winter time. We had a great big windstorm come through. I think this was actually about 2 years ago that there was probably about 25-30 trees that were down right across the trail, so it made the entire trail impassable. So there was, I believe, about 3 of us out there that we went out and cleared the path back through it again, so that way people weren't going around everything, and we've made it all safe again. Again, another picture here of us, of what happens, you know, as the trees die off. You know, obviously they're going to fall in windstorms, and you know, obviously animals crawling up them and all that. So we cleared that one out as well. One of the other things too that Cara does to keep all these trails clean and nice actually is, believe it or not, we actually do a lot of garbage pickup. I honestly can't say actually how hard that team actually works when they come out in June to clean up garbage. We even go out, talk to a lot of the random campers out that are there alongside the roads and the trails. With each year is getting better. It's never stopped, but it is getting better and better, which is great to see, because in years past that it was getting pretty bad, where we didn't even have enough dumpsters to actually contain what we actually had, which was quite sad to see. But the last couple of years, actually, it's been really good to see that we always get 2 dumpsters, and this June wasn't that bad. We filled 2, and we still had a little bit of room left for a little bit more. So this is so a lot of these pictures. This picture, I believe, was actually from last year, 2021, and we managed to fill the one and about half fill the other one. And we've actually, believe it or not, we've actually found pretty much a whole office just about out in the woods. I don't know who decided to take their office out into the woods and destroy it, but obviously somebody had a bit of an issue with their office. So again, even our team, they even go above and beyond and George here, he even went dumpster diving and dragged out all the bottles and cans and everything, so that way we could actually send them off to get recycled, which was really great to see. And that picture of all the bags there, that's actually from that year of all the bottles. I couldn't believe we actually found that many. It was unbelievable. This was actually a lot of these were all from a couple of these are from last year that we did. We were out up on Hunter Valley Road is where we ended up at. And this is our volunteer hours that we've actually been putting in over the last several years. Actually, each year, we've kind of grown since 2017. Even with COVID and stuff, we managed to actually have a really good good volunteer base, which was great to see. We have had some. We have put a lot of hours in, which is great to see that our hours kind of have been going up and stuff, and the projects are getting done, which is even more better. And hopefully come June, we'll actually end up with some more. And obviously with our partners and stuff. So obviously like to thank all the partners and all that have managed to make this possible and make Cara what it is actually too, and help support us. And when we need things done, it's great to see.
Thank you so much, Dan, for your presentation and for all the work that you and your team does on the landscape. Last but not least, we have Barry Tunzelman. So Barry, if you could take over the share screen and turn on your camera. Barry is a member of the Trails for Tomorrow executive team with the external relations position. He enjoys working with all other stakeholders in making our trails sustainable for all to enjoy, and actively works with others to make this happen.
Yeah, where's my PowerPoint? There it is. Okay, what's happening? Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not very good at all this.
No worries. If you can just turn it into
Yeah,
the slideshow, then you should be good to go.
Stopping me from doing that. Oh, hang on. Here we go. Slideshow. Hang on, here we go. From the beginning. There we go. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, this is a short presentation, but just before I start, Dan's group does exactly kind of what all the Jeepers and off-road vehicles do as well. It's pretty much a common cause with side-by-side ATV and motorcycle and 4x4 vehicle users on the trails. So anyway, this is not about that. So. This one I'd like to talk today is about the Margaret Lake project in 2022. And a brief history of Trails for Tomorrow. We were founded in 2013, and we're a registered society in Alberta. And we were formed from the need to have a collective voice to represent four-wheel drive vehicles using all the trails, because a lot of clubs were trying to contact the government, and the government, for some reason or whatever, just doesn't listen to 20 or 30 different groups coming in and mainly complaining. So Trails for Tomorrow was formed then. Like I said earlier, too many splinter groups trying to get through to government to be heard. Our focus is ensuring the sustainability of recreational trails for four-wheel drive vehicles. We also support conservation, watershed, and reclamation goals in Alberta. And that includes working with the two organizations we worked with the most so far is Cows and Fish, of course, and Ghost Watershed Alliance with Marina and her crew. Our focus is on the trails, not the users. A bit like the fish are part of the landscape. So fast forward. In 2022, Trails for Tomorrow was awarded a status to open TFA work permits with AEP in 2022. And that gives us a voice now back to the minister level. TFA is a temporary field authorization, and we work with AEP, present programs for, in this case, the Margaret Lake project, and it was done about a year earlier than the project actually started. So it takes that long to get these TFAs through the system, but we've got a good working relationship now with AEP. I think it's still called that. And yeah, this project was submitted in 2021 and reviewed and approved in early 22. So Margaret Lake project, we did the plan, we ride the trails with AEP reps and we decide on a scope of work. The work for this particular phase, which was the North Fork of the trail to Margaret Lake, was commenced in September 10th and 11th last year. The approved plan was the North Trail and was covered under our Margaret Lake development plan that was submitted to AEP. So this is quite a rigorous approval process. We had 12 trucks representing from the Calgary Jeep Association and the Rocky Mountain Land Cruisers, as well as various individuals from Calgary, interested individuals. It's not hard to get volunteers for these projects. We achieved many of the trail maintenance objectives that weekend. And this set us up with the very important learnings to help complete the remaining portions of the plan for 23. And it also gave us a bunch of learnings and lessons learned for our future planning projects. So this here is a drone shot of some of the volunteers' vehicles. Like I said earlier, participation is always good from clubs and individuals. And the volunteers came with lots of hand tools because machinery is not allowed. We're not allowed to use machinery. And it is any machinery that is required is supplied and operated by AEP and or their approved contractors. This was the start of the weekend, much better weather than now. So this is some of the examples of what was worked on and improved. And we drained these mud puddles. And of course, we have a guy sitting in a vehicle there to warn others that came along the trail while we were working that we're doing all this work on this project. And of course, safety was a priority. So everybody had to wear vests and protective PPE. So this one here is, I can't remember exactly where it is, but this photo shows an example of a machine dug swale that was dug by AEP contractors some time ago. And what it does is it drains water off into this, because of the large volume of water, that swale will drain off the hill. It disperses down the slope and doesn't reach a stream or a fish habitat. This particular photo was when we were driving the trail to scope the work. So this is kind of what we do. Terrain that was worked on and improved, this big puddle was drained to a non-critical slope and minimizing disturbance to stream banks and flows by working closely with AEP. So this is all taken care of during the planning stage. And the plan is on our website, actually, if anybody wants to have a look at it, at trailsfortomorrow.ca. And the plan is quite comprehensive. So I've really shortened it up for this presentation. So this is the actual work example of what we were doing that weekend. Crews working safely with the hand tools, and we were digging water bars. Now, Dan mentioned water bars earlier, but in some cases we use water bars on a slight angle and lots of them in a row down the hill. And what that does is it disperses the water a bit more evenly if we want it to go down over a slope, down a hill, to let the vegetation and the slope absorb the water instead of it going down to the bottom of the hill. Phase 2 is set for this year. We're planning, I can't remember, I think it's in June that it's planned for, with AEP bringing in equipment. It's still part of the original approved plan submitted to AEP, so it's just the part B of the plan. And it will involve the use of mechanical excavators and other machinery operated by AEP, like I mentioned before, or their contractors. And this will complete the Margaret Lake proposal that we have with AEP. And of course, we are planning other projects with AEP through the TFA procedure. And here we have other products there. That's it.
Thank you very much, Barry, for the presentation. And can I have all of the presenters turn their cameras on and unmute? We'll move on to some question and answer.
How do I stopped sharing like that. Okay, there we go. Oh.
So I see that we had some very keen panelists tonight and have answered many of the questions in the box. So I'll start with the first open one, and then I might go back to some of the other ones just in case other people missed them. But we have a question for Dan from John. And he asks, what do you recommend as a possible solution to the increasing number on non-designated trails, especially the quagmire of single track rips and rills up steep terrain that create massive erosion gullies, and single track trails being created all over the Ghost clues, even in the protected areas? Oh, it looks like, yeah.
I think it's going to be some partnerships, obviously, with a lot of these the single track riders to try and get some education on it and stuff. Like if we can work with these groups, and again, if we can try and control the areas that they go by making it, just by putting natural barriers there, I think we can try and help control these offshoots and stuff, which will make it a lot better for everybody. I mean, it's just something simple as, a fallen tree down can make all the difference and keep people on the trail rather than off it.
Yeah, did anybody else want to add anything to that? Barry, Marina?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a bigger conversation, of course. And at the end of the day, we really have to look at the trail system and see, does it meet users' needs? And, why are people creating more and more trails? Because obviously they are looking for something that isn't there on the landscape right now. That's a much, much bigger conversation. But I think little by little, with this few organizations that are here today, we're trying to improve the trail system and make it a better experience for people, and while maintaining environmental sustainability as well.
Yeah, and I would also add that signage goes a long way. If there is no signage, people will just follow any trail anywhere. And often if you just put up some signage and recommend some loops and create some sort of system, most users aren't that adventurous. They're not just going to go rando cruising. So when I worked at the Nordic Center in Canmore about 13 years ago, we developed the whole signage plan and created some loops, and it really changed user patterns and stopped a lot of the illegal trail building.
And I would like to add to Maggie's comment about signs, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. But if we had more signs out on the trails, you wouldn't have people crossing streams to go to that beautiful looking camp spot across the stream, which is highly illegal to do. So
Thank you. I'm just going through some questions that were previously answered, and seeing that There was a previous question that you answered, Dan and Flora, regarding who looks after trails in McLean Creek. And perhaps maybe just to elaborate on that question, because this is something that I've been asked before too, out in the different public land use zones, is who's responsible for maintenance of the trails? Is it designated to certain clubs? Do you guys have your like turf that you manage? Maybe just explain that a little bit, like what trails is Kara looking after versus Trails for Tomorrow, for example?
So so Kara itself is looking after everything basically south of Hunter Valley Road in Whitebriss, all the way down to the South Ghost staging area. That's what Kara looks after. It's enough turf already for us to deal with. But when it comes to McLean Creek, that's dealing with environment and parks. That's their kind of area. So obviously if there's things in that area that people are getting concerned about or have questions, they can obviously get in touch with environment and parks and talk to them about it. But other than that, really it's everything that Kara does is strictly in the Ghost.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I can add to that too, Amy. Trails for Tomorrow don't really get assigned an area to look after. We're the voice between four-wheel drive clubs and the AEP, but McLean Creek, I can tell you right now, I can't talk for Dan's users on the trails they use because we don't go down them, but the trail maintenance at McLean Creek it gets pretty sad after the spring. You know, it's pretty chewed up. And one thing I can say is we had a big meeting with senior representatives from AEP within the last, I think 6 weeks or so. And McLean Creek is on their radar. Like Dan said, AEP look after McLean Creek, and they're going to change the whole format of McLean Creek. It sounds like from being almost like East Fisher and West Fisher are just mud bogs. And there's people that just want to go and do like overlanding, and they're going to look at changing the trails into some sort of an overlanding experience for people to go camping. Also, they're going to put the gun ranges in designated areas because people go camping and there's bullets flying around their tent, you know, so that's another thing that's going to happen. So.
Well, that's good to hear that there will be some trail planning happening in that area. It is in need of it for sure. I have a question / comment here for Barry regarding the Margaret Trail. Just a comment that it looks physically and technically unstable in soft soil on a considerable slope. In my opinion, it would require any hardening. Has hardening ever been discussed for maintenance on that trail?
Well, both forks that I actually go out to Margaret Lake myself personally. Both forks are fairly well compacted, which is not what fish people want to see. But anyway, there's definitely deep mud holes, and our aim is to actually get rid of those and not have them anymore, drain them off. And I haven't seen any real soft stuff. Some of the steep hills are a bit soft, you know, like gravel, and you lose traction even in something like a Jeep. But I haven't seen any soft stuff that needs compaction there on both the South and the North Fork. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I guess I don't see any other questions right now. So a question that I would put to each of you is, you know, if I am tuning into these sessions and I'm really inspired to get involved, how do I go about doing that? Do I need to be an OHV user to join a club and volunteer with Kara or Trails for Tomorrow? Similar with the Ghost, do I need to be a member? Yeah, how do I sign up? How do I get involved?
Well, for Kara and stuff, it's I mean, you don't have to be a member to come out and volunteer with us. What we've implemented in the last little year is, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these clubs, some clubs aren't for everybody. So usually a lot of people will come out the first time, kind of get to know us, see what we're about. And a lot of times the second day they're out, they've got their membership in hand, and it's getting the word out with people to try and get them to join these clubs. That's I think the biggest hurdle is to get people to actually join these clubs. And I know I can speak for Kara and stuff like that, that our volunteers that we have, I mean, it's unbelievable.
And for Trails for Tomorrow, we're not really a club. We are a 100% executive group that forms Trails for Tomorrow. We don't really have any members, but our members we represent are the four-wheel drive clubs. So far, I think we got about 21 of them on our website, and I encourage people to contact those groups and clubs, and then most certainly they can volunteer for whatever they like, and we reach out to those clubs every time we're doing a project or something, and they're welcome to come out and help.
Marina?
Yeah, so we always try to do at least one bioengineering project a year, and we also try to do at least one cleanup a year out in the Ghost as well. Oftentimes we'll partner with many of the organizations that are here today and a few others as well, like Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And we usually post all of these events on our website. There's no cost involved. And one thing that's really important to us is we feed our volunteers well, because they work hard out there on the landscape, and we want to really thank them for doing that. And so we have a really good caterer from Calgary, and everybody loves the food, and make sure that everybody has fun, doesn't get hurt, meets new people, has good experiences out there on the landscape. So yeah, if you want to get involved, you don't have to be a member, but of course we appreciate it. Our membership rates are not very high, and you can sign up through our website, ghostwatershed.ca, and we do have an Eventbrite page as well where you can sign up for events, and everything is linked to our website. And we'd love to see you.
And I should say, like, even though you've been in the background helping on the technical aspects of this, Flora, feel free to turn your camera on and unmute if you'd like to speak on behalf of the Elbow River Watershed Partnership. Not to put you on the spot or anything, to feel like you have to, but certainly the Elbow River Watershed Partnership is doing some fantastic work out on the landscape as well.
Hey, thanks, Amy. Yeah, I just started writing in the chat, but I can say in person, we're hoping to do some work as well on trails this year in the West Bragg Creek day use area, as well as off of Fullerton and Station Flats, and McLean Creek too. So erwp.org is our website, and we have a newsletter where we post upcoming events on the newsletter. I'll send the link afterwards.
Thank you, Flora. Yeah, and I would encourage you as well. I put the Cows and Fish website up earlier, and again, if you can sign up for the newsletter, or you can also we have a specific volunteer sign up sheet, and we are always looking for recruits. We operate province wide, so not solely in the Bow River watershed, but across the province. So do feel free to hop over to our website and sign up. And then I don't know, Maggie, is there any opportunities through McElhaney for participation? Do you guys offer workshops or courses specifically for trail maintenance?
Yeah, we've often worked with groups that want to do trail maintenance workshops with their members and whatnot. I know we've done work with Friends of Kananaskis in the past. And yeah, but just generally, I think volunteering and getting out there, like most times when there's a volunteer day, you have experienced crew leaders on board, and you will just learn so much and have such an appreciation for the work that goes into maintaining trails. I have worked in this realm for, you know, over a decade now, and I'm like, oh, we'll just go in there and we'll fix this trail. And it takes forever, and it takes so many people, and it takes planning and time and money. And the more help that trail organizations can get to do the work, the better. And yeah, I mentioned as an answer to someone's question, but you know, we can't do work for free. Unfortunately, I don't own the company, but happy to help, like, find grants, write rationale for a grant as to why trails are important or why you need money to do a trail plan, brainstorm ideas. I mean, I'm a sucker for making things look good out there. And especially, I really enjoy working with the motorized groups because I feel like the motorized groups are typically under-resourced in an administration perspective. So yeah, I mean, reach out, ask questions, and don't hesitate to get out and volunteer on the ground.
Thank you. And before we hit 8:30, and while I am still remembering, I do have a couple questions to ask in a poll. So before people log off and before we say goodbye to our wonderful presenters for the day, I'm going to launch a couple polls just to get some feedback from people on the call. I want to know, did you learn something new today? It's a pretty simple yes or no question. And second, as follow-up to that, do you feel encouraged to participate in stewardship activities? And if you answer yes or maybe to that second question, again, definitely head over to the websites that have been listed in the chat, whether that's the Elbow River Watershed Partnership or the Ghost Watershed Alliance Society or Cows and Fish or Trails for Tomorrow or Calgary ATV Riders Association. That was a lot to say all at once. And I will share the results with you. Looks like 95% of people learned something, so that is awesome. And I hope presenters feel really good about that. We had over 50 people tonight, so that's a lot of people that learned something new. And 81% of those people also feel encouraged to participate in stewardship on the ground. So congratulations, and thank you everybody for attending. Again, thanks to our funders, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans through the Habitat Stewardship Fund, and through the Alberta government through Cows and Fish's Eastern Slopes grant. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.